Welcome to the Designing Music Now podcast, a podcast dedicated to the craft of creating music for video games and interactive media. I'm your host, Dale Crowley.
And I'm Lawson Madlener.
Today we are very honored to have Ondrej from Virharmonic talking about their new Soul series, in particular their new solo Bohemian violin. First, let's check out a few excerpts from the upcoming interview.
But again, it will be an approach to how to write music easily and inspirationally. This year for Virharmonic is by far the most exciting, but also by far the most demanding.
Lawson, what did you think of the instrument as you played it?
I've never played anything like it before. I just started doing the Swan. Sounded like I was adding all this expression and doing all this technical MIDI tweaking and all this when literally I was just pressing a note. And the built-in expressiveness was really cool. And
Bohemian violin is so easy to use. It actually has to be the easiest and most inspirational instrument I've ever played. I mean, there are...
Thank you very much, Dale.
I mean, you just sit down and it just sounds beautiful, and you don't have to do anything other than play. You don't have to think about all the...
That was the point.
Now let's check out a beautiful demo song written by Adrien Binet for the Bohemian violin. Beautiful, beautiful violin. And now on with the interview.
So, Ondrej, tell us a little bit about yourself and about Virharmonic.
Well, basically what I do, I'm a sound engineer, a musician, and a violinist. That's what I've been doing for the past decade or so. And I'm classically trained violinist in terms of the musical background training by Libor Mișureț in Moravian town, who taught me for about, I think, 14 years, who put up with me, or something like that. Quite a long time he put up with me. And basically in Virharmonic, what we try to do is look at where we see underdeveloped sections of the virtual industry. The way we are with virtual instruments, in my opinion, is that they're already very, very good. There are very, very good tools out there for composers. And it's, to be honest, the golden time to be a composer. I cannot think of a better time to start writing music than really the 2010 onwards, when all the virtual instruments just exploded. And I mean the high-grade, high-quality virtual instruments. And we started with virtual choirs, where the idea was to create very, very easy-to-use word-building choirs. So instead of being required to draw a lot of curves and literally map the words, we wanted the user to just type the letters in and then play the phrase and just get a realistic sound as easily as possible. Now, we somewhat achieved it, and I'm very happy with the result. And with our knowledge now, 4 years down the line of Virharmonic, of course, we can see a lot of space for improvements. And some of the things are actually coming even for the choirs. We actually have some planned updates there as well. But that brought us really, after we completed the choir series, it brought us to the Soul Capture series, which is the main focus for this and next year for our company. And that is to create not a virtual instrument us per se, but a virtual performer, and
Right.
that's a completely new concept. We sort of worked on. It's been more than a year. It's been quite a long time in development. We actually conceptualized the first violin we conceptualized actually 7 years ago. when I recorded a bridge 5-string violin. I still have it somewhere. It's a archaic instrument now, built in Contact 3, I think, or 2. It was Contact 2 or Contact 3. And that was when I was doing more of a private stuff for my friends who worked in the industry, and they needed something specific. I would make it for them and bounce it so they could work with that. And nowadays, of course, we do commercial products, and we make them accessible to the wider audience. And it is quite a unique journey now, because this year for Virharmonic is by far the most exciting, but also by far the most demanding. We've committed ourselves to launching 4 libraries this year.
Right.
The Bohemian violin, the Bohemian cello, a viola, and a second violin. And all of these also have expansion plans. Because we don't like to be bored, and we really don't value sleep. You know, it's overrated. We discovered that 4 hours a day is perfectly fine.
Oh goodness.
But all jokes aside, I mean, because we wanted to do a performer rather than a virtual instrument, we had to come up with completely new ways of handling the quantity of data which is thrown on the system. And I mean, that's where I have to really thank UVI Engine. It's one of those engines which isn't spoken much about, and it really deserves a lot of spotlight, because we work in Falcon, and then it becomes UVI workstation for the user, so it's powered for them. For those who own Falcon, they can actually play it unlocked, like you would in Contact Sampler. It's the same sort of similar relationship to Contact Player, Contact Sampler, and it's absolutely amazing. I mean, scripting in Lua is so tidy and so powerful that it makes certain tasks which I can't even imagine how we would do in Contact. And we did launch our choral libraries first in Contact. Voices of Prague was originally a Contact library. It's really amazing. So I have to give actually a sort of big hat off to the UVI guys, because while Bohemian violin is unique in its own right, without UVI we wouldn't be able to create what we created. There is no doubt about that. And we definitely couldn't expand it the way we're expanding it. So that's a big part of what's coming this year.
Fantastic.
Wow, that answered like 6 questions in one.
I apologize. I get easily distracted.
No, that's great.
Yeah, that's good.
So for me, the UVI workstation is really easy to use. It's free. It works great in Pro Tools 12. It was, I had to increase the buffer to the maximum to make sure, there were no cutouts and things like that. That could be my system. I don't know. But
what
beyond that,
on a hard drive. It depends what you're using. I'm going to troubleshoot you. It's not a problem. I can troubleshoot you.
Well, to be fair, I have it on an SSD, and I don't get any clicks or pops whatsoever.
Yeah.
Cool. I'm not using an SSD. I'm using a standard, external. It's an internal, probably 7,200 RPM.
Yeah. All right. I mean,
and there's no pops when I increase there's no pops when I increase the buffer size. But beyond that, I found it to be super easy to install and use.
Yeah, we're actually one of the few companies, I don't know if you spotted on our website, that we say recommended an SSD. The reason why we recommend SSD is, first of all, UVI takes a very large advantage of the SSD streaming. It decreases the size it takes in RAM massively, and it also speeds up the loading. I think the loading time for the Bohemian violin on an SSD is about 10 to 11 seconds. It sort of varies based on how you've got the streaming set up, but it's incredibly fast. And the great advantage is that when it loads on UVI, it's loaded. That's it. is there. It's not doing really that you have to wait for another 30-40 seconds before you can play it. Although some level of background loading is being introduced slowly in UVI, so we'll see how they evolve it as they go along. We're supporting anything really that makes it easier for the user to use and get faster load times and stream times. So I think that with Falcon being launched on UVI, we'll see a lot of changes this year as well from UVI, and I'm sure that they'll keep us all posted what's coming. They've been very good at that. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, apart from UVI, the player itself, I mean, what your instrument, the Bohemian violin, is so easy to use. It actually has to be the easiest and most inspirational instrument I've ever played. I mean, there are.
Thank you very much, Dale.
I mean, you just sit down and it just sounds beautiful, and you don't have to do anything other than play. You don't have to think about all the. Yeah.
That was the point. I mean, that was ultimately, we've built actually 12 concepts. It might sound crazy, but we've actually recorded 12 times 1 octave of the instrument in different ways and with different scripts and different variations. And we scrapped them all. We actually scrapped all 12 at the end of it. That happened sort of, I think we finished that first conceptual stage around 12, 13 months ago. And what we did was we pick out what was good on each of the concepts and what was terrible on each of these concepts, or bad, or what didn't work. And then we literally troubleshooted that like you would troubleshoot anything else in life, and we created a new root concept. And that became the basically the Bohemian violin concept stage 1. And what the users have, or what you have now, is we call it almost like a baby violin now, because we're actually around 8,000 samples ahead of what the users have. But what we're doing at the moment is troubleshooting, polishing, and making sure that when we launch the expansion 1, it's one of those things where we're adding a lot of articulation styles and things which are happening in the background. I mean, for starters, we didn't plan to do it originally, but we're doing it in the end because we got convinced by all the feedback. The original idea for expansion 1 was to just add bow types and positions, and that was to be it. And you can imagine that in terms of our sampling, we do everything in 3 dynamics. So that adds a lot of work. Most of the solo instruments on the market today stick to 1 dynamic, maybe 2 dynamics, and that's roughly where they like to stay. That's like the comfort zone. We do everything in 3 dynamics because as a violinist, it was the one thing which I was not happy to compromise on. Violin has too much color in each of those core dynamics. I mean, if I could, I would do 5 dynamics. One of our concepts actually had 5 dynamics. When you had an ultra soft, it was like literally when you just smidgeting the bow lightly, featherly over the string, and it's gorgeous, and it has so many applications, and it might come back in one of the expansions. But I'm not saying any more about that because we have it. But you know, you then get to that point of, geez, I'm running out of memory. I really don't have enough space, and you start optimizing things to sort of make sure that what you're creating is actually going to run on a normal today's computer. I mean, we've got 2 rigs we test on. One which is 8 gig of RAM. It's a laptop with a standard 7,200 RPM. Mm-hmm. So it's what almost everybody has in their home. Or we would hope at least, you know, and it's an i3 processor, so it's quite, you know, that's a $300 computer. Yeah, anybody tool, you know, we call it the anybody tool, which most people who want to do music, I think that they have at least that. And then we have my rig, which is my main rig, which is the i7, 64 gigabytes RAM, 4 SSDs, and you know, it's glorious to work on it, but I understand that majority of users who are in the hobby section will not be investing that much into their rig. It's quite unreasonable, to be fair. If you're just a hobby, it's really OP. But for us, you know, who work in the industry, when we test how the instrument reacts with templates where you have 1,000 tracks, 2,000 tracks, you want to make sure that your instrument is not clashing or causing issues. So we need to be able to run those rig tests. So that's where the other computer comes in very much so. But all libraries are tested on a really weak machine, and well, on the lower end machine, and then on a high end machine. So when we do our minimum and maximum specs, they are tested specs. They are not made up specs we think that they are there, and that's actually tested,
right.
because it saves us a lot of time troubleshooting.
Lawson is a violinist, and so that's what kind of got me interested in this. A lot of times, Lawson and I will work together, and he will, play violin on compositions that I work on, and so on. And he's also, of course, a great composer. Lawson, what did you think of the instrument as you played it?
I thought it was very, I don't know, it was when I say this in a good way, it was. I've never played anything like it before, and I'm not a pianist. I'm not a keyboardist. I play things in like this.
So more like me, yeah.
Yeah, it was. I just started doing the Swan, and the fact that I could just velocity sensitive it, just going down da da da. It sounded like I was adding all this expression and doing all this technical MIDI tweaking and all this, when literally I was just pressing a note, and the built-in expressiveness was really cool. And I say this because I'm not a fan of built-in expressive libraries. I like being able to control everything manually. I don't like when people automatically put dynamics in. But I have to say, for this specific library, granted, I think this is the only library I have that has that, because I try to avoid getting them when they have built-in dynamics. I'm very impressed with that. I didn't need to. I thought I was going to be like, oh, I guess I'm going to have to go into the sustains and manually ride the mod wheel. But I didn't need to at all. It went fine, and I was very, very impressed by that. And the pizzes and staccatos were very nice. The normal legatos were chill, but I am looking forward to the expansion pack with like the portamentos and slurs and stuff. It was very, very nice library. I'm impressed.
Well, I think you nailed it when you said that you just played and it sort of worked with you. The idea, I, for example, do gigs sometimes for commercials and things like that, where you know yourself from experience, there are very tough deadlines. I think I did a recent gig I received the gig at 7 o'clock in the morning. By 10 o'clock I had to deliver the first draft, and by 12 o'clock the final approved production must have been ready, and it was 1 minute track, separated into a 15-second slot, 30-second slot, and a 1 minute slot, and it all had to be ready by 12 o'clock, or I lost the gig and probably got shouted at by the director because they basically forgot about it. I don't know how, and it goes into production and it needs to be ready for. It actually went to broadcast the same night, which is insane. But as we know that these deadlines are turning tougher and tougher and tougher, and it's happened to me actually a lot of times when I was working on a product, and I've opted to actually calling a musician and rather writing the mock-up, calling them, hey, can you get here in an hour? I really need to get it recorded. I'm going to record the violin, you record the guitar or whatever, and we're going to glue it together, and then you're going to stay here for the next 3 hours when we do amendments as the client contacts us and we respond, and we just fix it right away and get it done. And I found that very often that was actually faster than using VIs, which to me, it was like this contradiction. I want VIs for myself to be really fast and productive. I don't want to spend, well, I understand that Dale, who's a violinist, loves to tweak everything, because that makes perfect sense. With a string player who writes for strings will control the strings. We are very finicky about these things and very picky. So am I, Dale, that's perfectly fine. And that's ultimately where I realized that when I do all this tweaking and I draw the vibrato curves and adjust, here I want the vibrato to go up slightly behind the expression, etc. It takes a lot of time to actually create a believable mock-up. Now you can of course create a believable mock-up, and they can be brilliant. I've heard some amazing mock-ups in the past 2 years, which took me away, and I was like, wow, this is amazing. But I would also sort of love to know how long do some of these mock-ups take, because if I have a choice at the moment between using a VI or a real musician on a final gig, I'll always pick a real musician, which I think is great for the real musicians, and we supported Virharmonic, the live musicians, as much as we can on as many projects as we do, because without them none of this is possible. And I would urge all composers out there to make a vote for musicians. And I think that a lot of the studios or a lot of the composers don't realize how many musicians are around them, which they could sonar, give them, you know, a draft and start working with them and getting used to how they work. But we wanted the Bohemian Violin and the whole Soul Capture series to be literally plug, load, inspire, and play. No drawing of CC data, which brings us to the expansion 1. Now we're adding slurs, we're adding 2 more bow types and something I'm not going to talk about yet. And therefore, we originally wanted the expansion 1 to come out in Q1. But that did not include the slurs. They were planned with portmanteaus for expansion 2. The expansion 2, if you look at the original schedule, which is currently on the website, was planned to come out Q2, Q3, the expansion 2. And that expansion was all about the additional legato types. Now, because I want to see the slur in sooner, and I know a lot of other users want to see the slurred and fingered legato in sooner, the on-bow legato. We're adding it into the expansion 1, but of course that's a huge mammoth task to get it right and polished and working integrally. That again, all you do is there'll be a setting where you basically just play, where we already have it. It sort of works, I would say 90%, and we are pushing the last 10% in there. We have the script, we're basically teaching it to react how we want. And as you play, it will know when a slur is more natural than a bow change, and it will vary between the bow change legato and the slur legato based on how it suits for the piece. But we also making sure that all of this is again controllable if you need to force a certain behavior. So while you can direct the instrument by the way you play and it will understand you, on the other hand, there needs to be that force key, which with us, as you've probably spotted, we don't do key switching. It never latches. Nothing ever latches in our library.
You just hold it down.
It literally, yeah, it's for that period where you want that certain behavior. And the expansion 1 will show where the direction of the soul captures is going. It's massive. It's basically Bohemian Violin all over again in terms of the data almost. I think the sample count at the moment is reaching, and we're still adding material, we're still polishing, adding material, changing some of the notes. We actually changed some of the original sustains as well. If we came across a sustain I didn't like as a violinist, I went and re-recorded that sustain and that arc and things like that. I'm very, very difficult about these things. And because the Bohemian Violin is me playing, I take it very personally. I want to make sure that it reflects as much of my musical personality as possible. And that makes it much more difficult because I'm not making a virtual instrument. I'm trying to mimic how I think when I improvise. And that's the basis for Bohemian Violin. One could say it's an improviser in a box. And as a composer, you can tweak it. That's all. You can tell them, oh, you know, you've improvised it. Repeat it and do it like this.
So how did you get into doing the whole soul-based series or soul capture series? Like, because you've done only choir libraries, and everyone's like, oh, Virharmonic does the great choirs. And so then you released a violin library, and everyone's like, wait, what? So what was it? Just like you were like, oh man, we need some. You just had a new idea, or you had inspiration for something, or were you talking to someone, and they were like, oh, we need this, and you're like, yeah, we should do that, or how did that work?
No, when we actually went into the making of virtual instruments, we always had soul capture written out. The idea of making a soul capture series was the alpha. That's ultimately why we started making virtual instruments. But the technology, excuse me, but the technology at the time when we launched the choirs wasn't there. It wasn't technically possible to achieve what we wanted. And in some aspects, the technology will be borderlining what we want when we launch all the expansions. I mean, we at the moment we do it in 96 kilohertz and 24-bit, the sample rate, and it's using lossless compression FLAC to decrease the size. And when all expansions come out, The size will be about the same if you use 44.1 kilohertz. That's how it's calculated, 16-bit. So as we launch expansions, we'll be offering a down compressed version, which will take less space for those who've got weaker machines. But at the same price, you'll also get the high-end 96 kilohertz, 24-bit, the highest quality. But you can imagine that when we added all these expansions and all this material, the library in 96 kilohertz will be taking around 4 gigabytes RAM. Maybe 2.5 gigabytes when you're using an SSD stream. Unless something changes on the streaming front. I mean, we might see technology which actually allows us to, and we're pushing UVI towards those directions, where it doesn't take that much, and in which case we'll be launching only 96 kilohertz. But we needed to make sure and optimize everything that even the mid-range computer can run the fully expanded library, and that simply wasn't possible 3 years ago when we went into choirs. That technology just wasn't there, and we were very often breaking our back on the original concepts. It's ultimately the same with the choirs. We have concepts for the choirs which are very close to the Soul Capture series we see on the violin now, but we didn't do it because the technology just, I mean, when we return back to choirs to re-record all choirs, and we do have a concept for that already, which is finalized, but when we get to do that again in, I don't know, 2, 3, 5 years, we're not saying at the moment, it will be a dimensionally different library, working completely differently to how it works now. And it's all about technology. So the violin just wasn't, we didn't feel that it was the right time for the technology versus what we wanted to achieve. And we found the right balance, I would say spring last year, because we actually recorded some of the soloists as well. So we actually have some other stuff. We're not releasing it. In the end, we made it private to some of the clients who wanted it. And it conceptualized other stuff. So there is, I mean, Virharmonic as a project is one of those kooky projects where we record a lot of stuff, we test a lot of things, we waste a lot of money. I think if anybody wanted to look at this as a profit-making project, they should run for the hills. For us, it's a project of passion, and we're in the process of building a hall to have our own recording hall. Wow. So we can offer some more persistency. Like all the Soul Capture series solo instruments are recorded in a specific room we adjusted for strings. Right. That room is made as a dry studio for strings, and to enhance the string quality, we've just finished the cello completely about 2 weeks ago. The last takes were taken, and when the cellist heard it, he went, "Wow, I can't believe how it sounds." And we're like, "Yeah, awesome. I like to hear that. You know, when the player of the instrument is surprised how it sounds, it's cool. It always warms us up."
So the reverb is added in after?
Always added after. The cello, because again, it's about the body size of the instrument. So the violin is quite close on because it's a smaller bodied instrument, and we wanted the crispness and the clarity of the violin. Now, some people prefer it to be more sort of distant recording. On the most projects I worked on, it was preferred to do the closer range, so we went for the closer range recording. And ultimately, you can always make it further away by low pass and other techniques, spat or mir, and you can achieve very good results with that if you want it to be further away violin. So we didn't bother with that as it wasn't priority. And the same comes to 2 mic positions. I mean, we did I think it's over 8,800 samples or something like that for the version 1. On 1 microphone position. And I like it when people ask us, "Oh, why didn't you do 2 microphone positions?" And it's like, well, because I like our service. You know, we need to be able to supply the instruments and also not hog composers' hard drives. I mean, my biggest problem is, because I like to use SSDs, most of my SSDs are almost full now because of
I know the feeling.
how bloated the libraries are. And while I see reason for 3 microphone positions, for example, for a chamber orchestra or a choir or something like that, I really don't see the point for a solo instrument. So we stuck to one nice clean mic position. But the cello is a bit further away.
Yeah. So that's actually a great question. You know, the solo violin, the solo instruments are much harder to do in some regards than a chamber orchestra. Obviously, there's larger scale with the chamber or with a full orchestra. You know, but you've got you know, there's, because all the instruments are playing, if there are mistakes or things like that, you know, they get assumed in the whole take.
Yeah.
Where when you're doing a solo instrument, every little detail comes out. So can you talk about that a little bit, and some of the how you were able to handle that and those hurdles?
I think being anal, if I can use the term, that's the only way I can describe that. I think the cellist, because of course on the first one I was the recorded artist, so I was self-critical and you know, say sort of my own pain in the bottom for the work we've done there. And with a cellist, I could sometimes see that he's almost losing his patience when I'm like, well, you know, you're sliding rhythmically here, and we need to redo that, and no, this whole octave, I'm not happy with that. We need to do that again and again and again and again, and round robins, and you know, oh, that slow was too slow. No, again, you know. And sometimes when you do, I think it was one Septima, and he's a you know, professional cellist, plays in an orchestra and plays as a soloist as well, and I've worked with him many times, and he's absolutely brilliant. But every musician, I think we play on the violin, you will hit that one interval which just doesn't go into your hands, that Septima or the you know, diminished sixth or something like that, and you are literally doing that glide. It's just not quite coming 100% right. And we don't do tuning on these samples. We don't tweak anything really. So that means that they need to hit it right. And I think the cello is one of those experienced like 20 intervals, 20 times taking one interval to get 2 round robins.
Oh.
And it was on the really high notes as well, on the A string, where the hand is suffering regardless. Left hand, and he just said, you know what, I don't smoke, but I'm really feeling like a fag right now because it's terrible. So, you know, like you said, it makes you, I think the best way to describe it is, as a musician, it makes you question if you're as good as you thought when you're recording it, because you have to subject yourself to huge self-criticism. And you really need to be very careful when you class something as, okay, I'm happy with this, I can leave it in, that's the take that will go in. And I think that the violin, I don't even know how many hours it's at the moment as a total take. I think if we took all the concepts together and everything that's there, it will be reaching well over 200 hours of takes and sitting in the studio. Wow. And recording. As I said, this is really, if anybody wants to go into virtual instruments and want to run them for profit, don't be inventive. You know, that's the easiest advice. Just don't try to invent the wheel, because you know, it will fall on you and slap you in the face. But then on the other hand, I love the idea of trying to do something new and try to see how it can slot together and what it can do. I mean, that was the word building was the first challenge. And what a challenge, let me say that openly. I had to learn all about phonetics. But slotting a solo instrument's a whole another beast. If I was to pick between recording what we're doing on the soul capture with a chamber orchestra or a solo instrument, I would say let's do the chamber. It would be so much easier, so much faster.
Right. Right.
We would be done in half of the time, and we could be sloppier. On the solo instrument, you really have no space for sloppiness. It will punish you.
You've just done an amazing job with it, and
thank you.
Really, really great. And so, tell us a little bit about the company Virharmonic. Who's involved, and what are their responsibilities?
Well, I'm the producer. The guy who records, the sound engineer, and very rarely, for one-off, I'm also the performer on the Bohemian violin. But normally I do not perform or do any of these tasks. And I'm the one who usually comes up with the logic, the concept, how will it work, and then we try to make it. Then you've got Alex, who works and does all the graphics, and helps me with the marketing, because I'm not a marketing guy at all. I mean, for me, I think that if the instrument is good enough, it should talk for itself, and
Yeah.
I don't see the reason for flashy videos and calling something glorious or whatever. I don't use these terms in general in life. I'm extremely self-critical, and in some ways you could say, I think you often describe me as negative. Well, I call it realistic, and that's the key difference.
Yeah.
So he's there to sort of make sure that we don't come across like a funeral service, but we as a development company who does VIs. And then you have Jordi, who is our programmer from Spain. We also had acoustic samples doing scripting for the choral series before, but because of the amount of concepts building and changing and rewriting, we took on Jordi, who is now our permanent scripter, who basically makes my insane ideas come reality. And together we always sort of tweak the scripts until we get it right. But I don't necessarily script. I understand Lua now, and I sort of can write the conceptual stuff. But for the making sure that the script actually then behaves how it should, and the core writing of the script, that's Jordi's job. And he does an amazing job. I can strongly say that he's amazing. No company can take him. He's ours. And then we've got Ondrej from Brno. He's another sound engineer. He works for Czech Radio, and we use him for extra cutting if and when we need. He sort of comes on board and jumps on board, and if he needs some strings, he asks us for the recordings and things like that. So it's like a collaboration we have ongoing. And that's basically the size of the harmonic. If anybody wants to do customer support, please drop us an email. But we've got very high demand, so I think that I got asked recently, how do we do it that we respond to an email within an hour on support ticket, because it flashes differently to us on email if it's support. And I said it's easy, we just don't sleep. It's an easy answer. Strong coffee, and and you're fine. So no, but as we grow, we've got beta testers as well, who write for us. You'll see them on some of the demos, and they're absolutely amazing. I have to thank them as well for all their work. Daniel Beijbom, writes amazing works and tells us what he thinks about the libraries when he gets them in whatever states they are in. Nitsan worked very closely with me on the Bohemian violin. He was somebody who I bounced off a lot of the ideas because I recorded for some of his projects as well. And we wanted to capture as much of me as possible. And when you're self-critical, you're like, no, it still doesn't sound like me. No, I'm not releasing it. It's never seen the day of light. It's never going to happen. No, it's staying dark closet now. And he was like, no, man, this has to come out. It's something that is worth sharing with the world. So he was the beta tester on there, and he's gonna work with us closely as well. Then we had Ed Hayden as well, amazing guy who worked with us on the choral series. And lots of others. I mean, we could be here naming people who really sort of help us, who we can bounce off.
So Bohemian Violins is not only a very personal project for you, it is a huge collaboration, as a lot of your instruments seem to be.
I think that everything we do requires some soundboard. You need to when you start making a virtual instrument, there are two ways. You can either make it just for yourself, and then that instrument answers to yourself, and then you hope that somebody likes it and they take it on board. The other option is that you do what we do when we create a concept and we start bouncing the ideas of the people who we work with, who are professionals in the industry, and we discuss, hey, wouldn't this be cool? Would it be cool, like if we try this, and they go, no, you're crazy, this will never work. And therefore, I have to go and prove them wrong. It's
great. Well, how do you do the pricing for the upgrades? Is it? I think, as I understand it, when you purchase it now, you still get some of the upgrades, right?
You get all of the upgrades.
Right. Wonderful.
Soul Capture series is a project of passion for us, and to be honest, we didn't know how to price it at all. I'll be absolutely honest. When we made it. We had a number of prices around, and what we try to do is make sure that it can supports us so we can carry on doing this full time and carry on investing the time and resources into making these instruments and experimenting. Because, I mean, all the money basically we've made on the choirs went back to R&D. All of it went back to research and development on these instruments. In terms of pay, we take nominal amounts, we make money elsewhere, and it's all about making sure that we can fund those projects. So it's quite amazing that we feel that we wanted to make sure that those who buy in early are not the ones who lose out, which is the standard approach again. But that's the standard approach everywhere in every industry at the moment. You know, you buy a TV which is new, it costs 500 euros. And in a month it's on a sale at 250 euros, and you think, oh well, whatever, you know, it happens. And because this is a living product in terms of continuous upgrades over the next year, and then it doesn't mean that it ends at the end of this year. You know, we want to be very clear. We announced 3 expansions. That's what we announced. We have so many other plans, but that's what we can say that will happen. Because that's a foreseeable future, how far we see.
Right.
And the idea of pricing was how to make it affordable for people to buy in, but how to make it fair priced if tomorrow I got hit by a bus and that was the end of Virharmonic, you know, that the people didn't lose out. So we basically priced it on the lower end of the value, and as the expansions are launched, we're not going to be increasing the price that much either, because we want the whole series to be purchasable even at the end.
Well, fantastic. I can say, as a pianist and not as a violinist or a string player, it is really wonderful to have Bohemian violin in my library and my set of tools, because you know, when I deliver stuff to clients, they don't know that I'm not a violinist now.
wait for the expansion 2 and 3, and when it's all complete. And I mean, my challenge is to trick some of my clients into believing that I've no longer played on their recording, and I could just take royalties for my virtual instrument. But I'm just kidding. I'm scrapping this off the record. You know, that was a naughty joke. But now the idea, of course, I don't think that a virtual instrument will ever replace a musician.
Exactly. And it'll never replace you, Lawson. Don't worry.
I think the reason is, and which a lot of people forget. I mean, we can teach the program to choose the right bows. We can teach the program to use the right arc, the right type of dynamic and expression, etc. And we can record sufficient pool of data for that. What we can never do, however, is the magic which happens when you record live. And I mean, ultimately, that's what we're trying to come as close to as we can, that you can play it live on the piano, because we know that helps to that improv sound, to the real sound.
Absolutely does. I mean, I feel like I'm playing a violin as I'm playing it. I can really get in that mode. So you succeeded on that.
But it's still not the real musician, because, you know, like we say, will be phenomenal for mock-ups and for projects where you simply don't have the violinist, when you can't get that. There are days like that, and we understand that, but we still want to encourage continuously all the composers to work with real musicians, and that's why we also don't go beyond the reasonable scales. You know, we get very often asked why didn't we take the sopranos to the E, you know, high E's, and it's like, well, it's great that they can howl it out, you know, once or twice, but try to write a piece up there and the singer will scream at you. It's an unreasonable range. And I've worked with enough singers to know that they will literally just turn around and go, you know, goodbye. Doors are out. This is insanity. Because I've wrote some of this insanity, so I know. I actually got sent to hell once. So, by a professional singer. Although I did convince her later. The other problem is, on the cello, we've actually... No, I'm not going to talk about it yet. That's coming next month. So, yeah, I'm going to have to keep some secrets.
I'm going to try to get a couple of those secrets out of you in this final question here, as we're kind of running out of time. What is the future? You've talked about the future a lot, but if you can just sort of give us, besides cello, in broad strokes, what are a couple of the new things that we can expect?
We can guarantee viola and second violin.
Nice.
That's what we can guarantee. The second thing, which is coming probably in sort of late 2016, 2017 is once all the expansions are out, or at least the violin and the first violin and the cello have expansion 3 out for both of these. We can then consider one more library, which is a baby of mine.
Viol da Gamba.
Pardon?
A Viol da Gamba, possibly? Oh, okay.
You're the third person asking for that, and I am yet to find a viola da gamba player in my region. So
Okay.
when the dream happens, I'll be right there.
Sweet.
You know, it's guaranteed. It will happen. If I meet one in our region, so they can suffer my supervision in the studio and put up my finicky behavior, then that will definitely happen. But not yet. And but it won't be necessarily the soul capture as we know it at the moment, but again, it will be an approach to how to write music easily and inspirationally. But it won't be orchestral, actually. It will be something slightly separate. But that will be, as we work on this, we also have that as a side baby I sort of work on, and we're still conceptualizing that. And the great thing about making concepts when you're busy on another project is the other project we've made concepts all the way till the end, so we know where we're going there. On this new project, we will do like a 2-hour recording session and then start working with the data and try to work out these recordings and how they can be applied. And it's back to that exciting, we're tweaking, we're looking, we're creating, we're inventive. While with the soul capture now, it's getting it done right and making sure that what we deliver is exactly down to the vision we had a year ago when we made that concept, which actually worked. And that's the more painstaking task. I think that anybody who wants to go into virtual instruments, I see that quite a lot on VI Control and other forums. People ask, what should they do if they want to do virtual instruments? I'll say, first of all, just be incredibly patient and learn as much as you can about this industry, because by the time you finish learning what was actually happening in the beginning of your learning curve, you'll already be a year out of date. The industry is moving so fast at the moment, and we're all, as developers, luckily evolving and making new innovative instruments that I'm actually really excited for where we'll be in 3-5 years. I think that the technology and the as developers, we keep pushing the barriers and the boundaries further and further and further. I think it's a very exciting time ahead for all of us, really.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And yes, I'm excited about what you've got now, and I'm also very excited about all the new stuff. So thanks again for your time today, Ondrej. It has been really, really wonderful. Yeah, thanks for everything that you've shared with us and all the knowledge and experience, and we really, really appreciate your time.
Okay, you're welcome, guys, and anytime.
Thank you.
Take care, guys.
Thank you for listening to the Designing Music Now podcast, a podcast dedicated to the craft of creating music for video games and interactive media. Please visit us at designingmusicnow.com for more info, news, and reviews on this subject. We would love to hear from you.